Look, here's the deal. Let's move on to Ravencoin. Let's talk about it. There's been a lot of rumors surrounding Bitmain creating ASICs for Ravencoin. For those not in the know, Ravencoin was a cryptocurrency that was released way back in 2017, and it was released with an algorithm called X16VR, which essentially rotated 16 different algorithms to prevent ASICs being developed for them. Eventually, it moved on to be developed into a second version of that original algorithm, and then it was converted into another algorithm called ProgPow, which was basically a collaboration of a lot of different people that had done a lot for ETH mining, like the enlargement pill and so on. A user that goes by Oh God, a Girl had also worked on it, a few other developers. That whole crew released ProgPow, which of course, because it has that ProgPow, progressive proof of work, you can kind of adapt it to any chain that you want. And that's why you see a lot of things like KAPow, which is basically ProgPow for Ravencoin. And then you have a bunch of other ones too. It's still effectively the same algorithm, right? It's just the name change for whatever the developer wants to have congruent in the naming scheme of their particular cryptocurrency. And ProgPow is meant to be ASIC resistant. And this is where we run into a big problem, because when we're talking about ASIC development for Ravencoin in particular, the issue is not, is it okay for Ravencoin to go to ASICs? It's, is it okay for the entire market of ASIC resistant cryptocurrencies currently out to be vulnerable to these ASICs? Because we're not talking about it being able to only mine Ravencoin. It'll eventually be able to mine all of them, just with a little bit of changes in naming and so on and so forth. This would be a massive blow to GPU mining as a whole, because if we just scroll through essentially all of the cryptocurrencies that are currently available, you'll start to notice that a lot of the small ones are on some form of ProgPow. And so you end up in a very sketchy situation. I also don't think it would be a good move for Ravencoin, but Tron Black, who obviously Ravencoin's his baby, doesn't seem to necessarily agree with me. It doesn't seem like I would say that they're totally for it, but not against it. Now, this is the kind of language I want to say here. I've read this type of language from every single developer in relation to ASICs coming onto the network. I have heard this from kaspa. I have heard this from Radiant. I have heard this from Alephium. And at the end of the day, the argument is that it doesn't matter what I think, as the decision would be up to the community, miners, and the economic actors, exchanges and shops, whether any anti-ASIC changes are adopted. And this is, like I said, I kind of have a problem with these types of statements because, one, it absolves any accountability for the situation in particular, and two, it's kind of basically it's a cop-out, right? It's like not rocking the boat either way. And I think that it's very odd coming from, a white paper that basically, was a big proponent of ASIC resistance for distribution. Do I think it would affect Ravencoin in particular negatively, like it did, Radiant, Alephium, one of these newer proof of work currencies? No, because a lot more is in circulation. So I think Ravencoin would probably have the most benefit out of any of those from ASICs coming onto the network, because you already have a ton of distribution out there, right? But it's the wider, broader cryptocurrency economy that I think would have a very negative impact from it in general. Now, this topic, it hasn't just been talked about here recently. This has been talked about since the inception of Ravencoin, and Tron actually did release a Medium article talking about this in more depth back in 2019. And I think this is important for everybody to read so they understand his thoughts, and hopefully it sums up a lot of why this discussion is being had in general. In January of 2018, the white paper for X16R was published with the suggestion that it was an ASIC resistant algorithm. It has been about a year and a half, and although the hash rate and profitability do not suggest there are ASICs on the Ravencoin network, there is some evidence that there might be an ASIC unit being built or possibly deployed. Remember that old crappy video? Some of y'all might, if you've been around, of the ASIC that was presumed to be mining Ravencoin or X16R. Pretty funny, but it's not, that never panned out. Anyways, he said that I've been told privately that Fusion Silicon tried to create an ASIC and gave up. There's also a paper suggesting that one mining pool has a high hash rate. So what now? Well, here are some of my thoughts. Yes, I know you didn't ask for my thoughts. An ASIC isn't evil, but as I stated in the original white paper, quote, the unfortunate side effect of this transition to ASIC hardware is the centralization of the mining. Now, for those of you that aren't aware, if you are GPU mineable, GPUs are generally available to the consumer, which means that you have a wider distribution of them, which means more people have access to them, which means more IPs are mining a cryptocurrency, and you distribute the supply across basic consumers. Now, even this has its flaws, okay? I'm not going to sit here and tell you GPU mining or CPU mining is the perfect way, because we've seen them break down before, like ASRock building the BC250s to mine Ethereum and selling them directly to farms for $15,000 a case. And now you can buy them for $400 a case. So I guess that didn't play out well in the long run, but they essentially, that was like targeted to large farms, which you could centralize underneath that farm. NVIDIA selling crypto mining cards with their CMP line, once again, directly to large farms and not giving general consumer access. These problems arise in any industry, and that happens with any economy of scale. You're going to have people that want to make larger purchases than a general consumer can purchase, and they are going to suck it all up as fast as they can. And this has been a problem. It doesn't matter if we're talking about a meme coin on Solana, or we're talking about an ASIC miner from Bitmain or a GPU from NVIDIA. If somebody has the opportunity to suck up a majority of the supply of anything, then they are going to do it, because we are playing an economies of scale game. And the more you have, the more you'll make. And that is essentially, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which one we're talking about, what the game we are playing is. The thing about mining in particular is that, and especially GPU mining, is you begin to reduce the ability of people to participate at a larger scale than the average consumer. And that is ultimately the goal, to increase the distribution overall across as many people as you possibly can, so that not only do you have a lot of people participating, which generates fees on the network, but you have basically a lot of people that will hold the price up. And this is just common sense things that's happened for a long time. ASICs in particular have a very negative perception because of the amount of companies that were building units at the very beginning, especially back in 2017 when Ravencoin was launched. You essentially had one ASIC manufacturer available at that time, with Bitmain and maybe WhatsMiner coming along behind them. And then eventually, of course, there was Gold Shell and some stuff like that on the smaller consumer available products. But you essentially had a single manufacturer. And if you have a single manufacturer, A manufacturer is going to want to dump as many units as they possibly can as quickly as possible, right? To make money, the strategy for them is to sell all the units that they have available as quickly as possible. That's why you have, distributors for GPUs, right? NVIDIA wants to sell big bulks. They don't want to sit there selling a single card to a single individual over and over and over again. And Bitmain's no different. So if they have a large miner that wants to buy a majority of their bulk, then they will sell to that one large miner. And if that one large miner buys something like a brand new coin ASIC, something like Alio, they can control the entire network. And the reason why this is important, right? If you have a single miner that has a majority of the hash rate, it means they have control over the voting process for that particular project and so on. And there's a lot of vulnerabilities that used to pop up. I've talked about them all before. We could talk about 51% attack and all of those things, double spending. All of that can be done if there's too much hash rate under control from one individual. Now, that one individual that's made that big investment, could say, wouldn't want to see the project fail, which was the argument in the case of Radiant. However, it's not the single individual that you have to worry about, but the people that have the knowledge to compromise that single individual to take over the hash power, right? So if somebody knows that there's a single miner mining a cryptocurrency and has a majority of the hash rate and wants to execute a double spend attack, they just need to find a vulnerability via, whatever social means or even vulnerabilities in network security, whatever it is, find that vulnerability and then execute that attack. It does, and it's easier for them to execute it because they don't have to go through the pain of, moving it back and forth. This is why distribution on pools is important too, because it's not the pool that's going to negatively impact something that they're making money off of. It would be a bad actor getting control of that pool. All right. So those are kind of the reasons behind it. And like I said, at that time, it was a very high likelihood that you were going to have a single manufacturer and then maybe a single person wanting to take over an entire blockchain. There are a lot more manufacturers within the ASIC space now. There are consumer grade available ASICs and so on. The hard part is, of course, the market directly drives the price of the ASICs. ASICs don't have regulation in their pricing. GPUs do, and that is a big difference as well that a lot of people don't realize. GPUs do have some sort of baseline regulations where the manufacturer themselves can't increase the cost of the GPU necessarily as much as, say, like Bitmain can, right? And that's why, yes, scalpers will buy it and drive the price of the GPUs up, but people would get on lists at Best Buy and so on to essentially buy them at the retail price. And that was still a possibility when it came to GPU mining in particular. Let's go ahead and get back to this though, because we need to go over all of this. So this made even truer by the fact, remember, we're talking about centralization with ASICs, that we've suggested we don't want ASICs on the Ravencoin network, so they will likely be running on a hidden pool and not be sold to everyone. An ASIC is just a chip that is optimized for one specific purpose. This is right in the ASIC name, as it stands for Application Specific Integrated Circuit. The specific application is mining with a particular algorithm like X16R, and an integrated circuit is a microchip. ASICs can be faster because they do one thing very well and can ignore everything else. An analogy is an Olympic marathon runner whose body composition is built for speed and distance versus a decathlon athlete that might be built differently to be able to do pretty well on 10 different athletic skills. The marathon runner might not be able to shot put very well because the light, lean frame needed to win a marathon isn't well suited for shot put. Those types of trade-offs exist when making a fast mining chip. Therefore, a mining algorithm that forces a chip to do many varied tasks is considered ASIC resistant. And this runs on a continuum. So what if you combined marathon running with weightlifting with Sudoku involved or solving? It gets harder to optimize for one without sacrificing something for the other tasks. The muscle-bound weightlifter has trouble quickly running 26.2 miles, while the light marathon frame has trouble lifting hundreds of pounds. Throw in the additional uncorrelated task of solving Sudoku, and a custom athlete is trickier to find build. And this is the point that a lot of ASIC proponents will, of course, talk about too, is if you are, a specific chip designed to do one thing, you can become more efficient at that thing, and better efficiency is typically considered good, at least in the world of the Biden administration. But come on, coal train with Trump. Obviously a joke, but sort of not. All right, so let's see. I think I got this messed up. There we go. Okay. So that is the premise of ASIC hard algos. There are several of these. RandomX, a leading candidate for the next Monero hard fork, CryptoNight R, and these are old, right? And ProgPal, which is what it eventually went to, which was designed to favor GPUs over ASICs. Is centralization bad? He said, I would argue yes, in the context of a cryptocurrency. You do not want centralization. If a government or small collection of governments can shut down the mining or request that certain transactions not be allowed, then a lot of the benefits of a cryptocurrency or crypto asset platform have been lost. If, on the other hand, CPUs everywhere are mining, then there is no way to make such a request. I do not think ASICs are dominating the Ravencoin network. I believe this because I've done back of napkin math to evaluate the profitability of a 1080 Ti mining rig we have at the office. Holy moly, this was written so long ago, back in the 1080 Ti days. At the time of the calculation a few weeks ago, it is making around $300 and costing about $65 in electricity. We do not know how much faster an ASIC can be than a GPU for X16R. But if there were a lot of ASICs that run thousands of times faster, then GPUs would be wildly unprofitable, and that isn't the case. Our rig is still running a profit, and this is pretty much true across the board. Remember, we talked about Alio just launching their ASIC, or basically having ASICs just launched for them from Ice River and Gold Shell. And immediately, if we go to the profitability charts for cryptocurrency, you will see that it is completely off the list now. We essentially have, as you can see here, Ergo hitting the top now, and Ironfish. And Alio is already off the list. So this is still true to this day. If ASICs are on the network in any form or fashion, GPUs become unprofitable nearly immediately. And that's just the way it goes. So he goes on to say, in the Ravencoin white paper, it is said to, quote, create a platform like Bitcoin with a new mining algorithm intended to prevent immediate dominance by mining pools and future dominance by ASIC mining equipment. X16R has worked well so far on both of these goals. I would argue not so well on the mining pool goal, but that's me. But the final goal of preventing future dominance by ASIC mining equipment is in question. So it seems like we should at least address the issue of potential ASICs. Let me state up front that there is some opposing an algorithm change. I do not believe that these individuals have an ASIC and therefore a hidden agenda. Now, in the case of, and this is a problem, so here's the cop-out, and this is where the cop-out from developers comes when it pertains to ASIC resistance, and I see it over and over again. The argument is the miners will decide because they have the hash rate. But if somebody has a lot of hash rate and it's a single person, guess who decides? That single person. That's why I don't like these, the miners will decide type of attitudes. If you vote based on just hash rate and somebody has a significant hash rate advantage with an incentive to keep the algorithm the same, what are they going to do? That's why we go back to me not liking those types of responses. Anyways, so they make a valid point that changing mining algorithms can be risky. During the transition, the mining hash rate can drop and the security can be reduced. If the existing miners don't follow or additional miners aren't added to make up the difference, then the security of Ravencoin is reduced. Now, that's only in the interim, and obviously, this is not the case anymore. There have been tons of good transitions for proof of work algorithms. You know, Meowcoin's done it. Like we're about to talk about, BlockX has done it. And there's a lot of different tools and technologies that people can use to make sure that there's seamless transfer of hash rate now. In the case of BlockX, even where you don't have X11 anymore in ASIC and you're moving to GPUs, maybe I would say would be a little bit more risky. But a lot of people seem to be able to pull it off, in my opinion. There is also a valid argument that a contentious hard fork, which ironically the folks leading the charge to keep it the same are more likely to make any hard fork a contentious one, may lead to chain splits. This older article about Monero hard fork describes the outcome of at least one attempt to prevent ASICs. Link will be down in the description if you want to read further into this. The final outcome was not terrible, but led to several new coins like Monero Original, the Monero Classic, and then although a Monero doesn't have the additional consideration of assets on their chain and therefore has a lower bar to clear for a successful algorithm chain. So let's explore the options. Here's what's interesting too. Like I said, we've had a lot of transitions that have gone through technology's gone to the point to where used to there would be an argument of the security and viability of switching algorithms. That has pretty much become a non-issue anymore. So there is the argument. It's still hard, don't get me wrong, but it's a lot more successful and a lot more proven. Back in the day when you would have algorithms changed frequently, right, you would end up with basically a bunch of forks. I mean, like he's talking about with Monero. I mean, there's forks of everything from things like this. There's forks from Ethereum. There's forks from all of it, right? And you could always say like longest chain wins, but that's not always agreeable and so on and so forth. So this has gotten a lot better. A lot of people understand cryptocurrency more and are able to execute. These miners are better at managing their rigs and their miners. So, you know, you have smoother transitions than you have seen in the past. So he says one option is to do nothing, which we know they didn't do because they went prog-pow. That's not a proactive approach. And once there are ASICs on the network, it will require more of a non-ASIC community effort to change the algorithm because simple BIP9 voting will not work if the network is already dominated by those, which was the point I went to previously, of course, is that, and it's acknowledged here. And I think that's why so he'll say it'll be up to the miners. Obviously they add in the community and so on and so forth. But you can't do a traditional hash rate vote in the case of ASICs and forking to essentially keep ASICs off the network, because if an ASIC does get on the network, well, they're going to be able to vote everybody else out. Minimal. One option is to make the miner change that would be easy for GPU mining software to change. It would likely be one line, perhaps an XOR with a specific 512 byte value after one of the algorithms. This would obsolete any existing ASICs, but would not have much effect beyond that. It would be easy for ASICs to adapt to that change for any ASICs that aren't already manufactured. It would obsolete any custom ASIC chips that are already manufactured, whether or not on network or not. Now, this has also changed here recently with RISC-V. As you guys know, like the Monero ASIC and so on and so forth, because of the development of RISC-V and the implications it has on the hardware and what you can do to adapt and so on, we've seen a lot of combos, right? We have a lot of options now where an ASIC miner can mine multiple algorithms. This is something that's been happening more and more. They can adapt better, not just FPGAs, but full-on ASICs can adapt better, and I do presume that will happen more and more in the future, right? I think you will have ASICs that can adapt algorithms a lot actually be able to do it full on. They'll probably lose some efficiency at the end of the day, because you'll just have to. But that is definitely something I think that's coming. It won't be a true ASIC, right? But it'll be close enough. So medium would be another option, is to switch from the X16R to X21S, which I don't think they ever went with. They went with an X16R2 V2. I'd have to go back and look. It uses every algorithm every time. As a refresher, X16R uses random algorithms based on nibbles from the previous block hash. The nibbles, which I'd like saying nibbles, are just random numbers between 0 and 15, determine the order of the algorithms. If a nibbler occurs twice, then the algo will be used twice. That's part of X21S prevents an algo from being used twice. And so he goes through this. We don't really need to talk about that one, but he finally goes on to the other option, which would be the X16RV2, which I think was the final decision, which was the full decision. So it's interesting now that the opinion has shifted to, I hope you enjoyed this clip from the Crypto Mining Show. If you would like to see more from this particular episode, take a look up here. Don't forget to also subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support me directly, you can go to sonofatech.locals.com and become a member. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next Tuesday.